Mr. Scheck is joined by Kate Sheen and Carl Stern of Quinn Emanuel, also for ARM.
Any other attorneys here?
Your Honor, I'm sorry, I had the mic off. This is Johnny Carter with Tom Patterson and Kevin Downs of Susman Godfrey for Medallion.
Okay, let's go ahead and proceed.
All right, Your Honor, I'd like to continue with Mr. Randy Lentz. I would like to continue with Mr. Randy Lentz, the remainder of the direct exam.
Okay, let's go ahead and proceed.
Mr. Lentz, when we left off yesterday briefly, we were looking at Defendant's Exhibit 61, which was an email from the end of December 2020. Your Honor, can I ask for a screen share?
Yeah, let me get that for you. All right.
Do you recall, Mr. Lentz, that we were looking? Do you recall, Mr. Lentz, that we were looking yesterday at Defendant's Exhibit 61, which was an email from Aaron Dunn of Glencore, right at the end of the year 2020, December 31, 2020, 4:11 p.m.? Yes. Okay. And you recall that we had looked at the provision, or the statement in here from Ms. Dunn in the second paragraph that said Glencore reserves all of its rights and defenses in this regard, including but not limited to its right to assert a carrier default against Medallion under the Transportation Services Agreement. You see that? Yes. Good. Your Honor, I move admission of Defendant's Exhibit 61.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Plaintiff 61 is admitted.
Mr. Lentz, yesterday we looked at Defendant's Exhibit 12, which is the Epic Local Rates Tariff dated April 1, 2020. And let's look again at the page that we talked about yesterday that has the 7 interconnects and 2 truck unloading facilities. Just a second. Okay, Your Honor, to be clear, the last exhibit was Defendant's Exhibit 61. I think you may have said Plaintiff's Exhibit 61.
Let me go back to that then. Okay, Defendant 61. Defendant 61 is admitted.
Very good. Mr. Lentz, so we were talking yesterday about the Epic Local Rates Tariff dated April 1, 2020 that has got the list of origin and delivery points by group? Yes. Okay. And we talked about how there were 7 interconnections and 2 truck unloading facilities. Do you recall that? Yes. At a high level, mechanically, how does an interconnect work from a gathering system like Medallion's into a long-haul pipeline like Epic has?
The gathering systems, as we talked about, is not point A to point B. We have multiple origin points coming into a gathering system and a limited number of delivery points out. A long-haul pipe is, again, it has much fewer origin points and is going generally to a single destination point.
Are you familiar with gathering systems offering service for 2 different qualities of crude oil?
No, I'm not. In my experience, gathering systems are either going to be gathering all of, say, WTL separately than WTI. Otherwise, they're running a blending operation. It's very hard for a gathering system to segregate quality because there's so many origin points that they would have to shut off to let the different grades be batched to the delivery point.
Let me ask.
I want to go back.
Let me ask a question that's kind of related to that, and it's based on some of these depositions I've been reading. So when it comes to line fill, explain to me exactly what line fill is.
So line fill is the amount of oil you need of a particular quality to fill segments of the pipe and the tanks, the bottoms of those tanks that you're going to use for that specific quality of oil. So if I may offer an example, it would be that if I was going to shut off WTI, I would have to be able to have storage tanks that I was going to store that WTI in while I put in WTL. Before I shut off the WTI, I have to be gathering WTL and putting it into separate WTL tanks in quantities that allow me, once the WTI is shut off, to then fill that segment of my pipe with WTL so that it can be a continuous flow down the pipeline.
Okay. I'm not sure if I fully understand. Okay, so let's say you have a gathering facility and they have WTI and they're running through a pipe. Is there still residue of that that's left over after that's run that's still in the pipe? Is that line fill, or is line fill, what exactly is line fill? Because one of the allegations is there wasn't, I think, line fill in some of these pipes of the right type. Is that, I guess maybe I don't understand exactly what line fill is.
So think about an example here is that, things have gotten much more automated. Back in the day, you actually put in what we call a separation pig. If you can imagine water running down a pipeline and you want to then put in oil behind it, you would at some point you would insert a separation pig and then immediately start running the oil behind the water so that the oil and the water would not mix together. Okay? To be able to immediately put something different in behind what's in the common stream at that point in time, you have to have certain quantities of that oil built up so that immediately it can start pushing that separation pig at the same rate of flow as the water was moving. And so you have to have enough of your new product in the tanks ready to go and ready to fill all the connecting pieces of pipe that are leading to your main trunk line, so that it's just an automatic movement. Because if you stop the flow, or if you can't do that immediately, it's kind of like you stop the train from moving down the tracks. You have to keep it moving. So you have to have that quantity of the new product you're intending to put in tanks, in those segments of pipe, and that is your line fill for the new quantity. So if there are multiple shippers that are going to ship a quality of, say, WTL in this case, based on those shippers' nominations of what they want to flow of that quality, everyone gets a pro rata share of the line fill. So they have to put up their pro rata share of what the pipeline needs to store in those tanks.
I'm not of asking my question, I think, and I'll try it one more time, because I think you're trying to answer a different question than what I'm asking. What is line fill? What is that? What is line fill? Is that something residue that needs to stay in the tank? I think what you're saying is that line fill is what the amount of product you need to ship through in order for it to be able to move through the pipes. Is that what line fill is?
I think I understand. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
What is line fill?
You made a good point. I think I understand your question. Yes, line fill is what would stay in those facilities.
In the facility.
Okay, so if you haven't.
Does line fill stay in the pipes, or does it stay in the gathering centers?
It stays in the tanks,
Not in the.
and it stays in in connecting pipes. For example, the pipes that connect the tanks to the main trunk line, it stays in those.
So if you have WTI line fill and you try to put WTL in it, then does that blend the two types of products?
No, sir. I think an easier way for me to illustrate it, and I apologize for the long one previously, is that we talked about the EPIC pipeline, and it had a segment from Orla to Crane. If that segment were to be all WTL, with the rest of the pipeline being WTI, you would have to fill that segment from Orla to Crane with WTL before you could then start moving additional WTL down the pipe. And so that entire segment from Orla to Crane would be line fill, and yes, it would stay in the pipe. And so let's say if that was 200,000 barrels that it takes to fill the line, then that's what would be the line fill. And then from that point forward, if anybody put WTL into the pipe, that's the quantity they would get out. And once that WTL shut off, that 200,000 would stay in the pipe. That is the line fill. But it also includes tanks that are needed for that service.
So in the actual pipes, you need to keep whatever product you're doing in the pipes to allow the product to, I guess, to be shipped to its eventual destination. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right.
So, like, for example, there was a question about whether or not ARM could nominate 2,000, I think it was 2,000 barrels, maybe a day, if I'm recalling it correctly, of WTL to be able to ship. In order for them to be able to pass it through the line, then EPIC would need to have line fill of WTL in the pipes to be able to transport that 2,000. Is that, you can't just kind of, I guess the way I had envisioned this before is if you put 2,000 in the pipes, it would go all the way to Corpus Christi, but you have to have line fill of the same type to get it to Corpus Christi. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, of the same type. Yes, otherwise you're blending those two different qualities together.
And if there's no line fill in the pipes, then it's not going to be able to be transported.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, that's helpful. All right, let's go back to what you were talking about.
Okay, so we had been talking about the physical interconnection between gathering systems and long-haul pipelines. On the same topic, let's also look at the EPIC Rules and Regulations tariff from April 1, 2020, which is Defendant's Exhibit 10. And let's go to the page, Bates numbered Medallion 2297, and look at Rule 4. Can you read Rule 4 of the EPIC Rules and Regulations tariff?
Other than operational storage, carrier owns no facilities for storage and will provide only minimal working tankage for storage that is incidental and necessary to the transportation of product. Non-incidental storage is a separate service which shipper must obtain from another person. Notwithstanding anything to the contrary herein, no term storage or dedicated storage will be offered at applicable operational storage facilities associated with transportation under this tariff.
So there is references there to EPIC's operational storage and storage incidental and necessary to transportation of the product, but did EPIC provide storage at its interconnects or truck unloading facilities for the use of, for example, Medallion or whoever received Medallion's capacity on the EPIC pipeline?
No, sir. It's their operational storage. They would utilize it to manage the flow on their pipe. But if a shipper needs to aggregate a particular product prior to it being delivered into EPIC, that is on them.
Are you aware of ARM or Glencore ever asking Medallion or Epic for storage to accumulate volumes of WTL or WTI to batch down the Epic pipeline?
No.
We've talked in this trial about 27,778 barrels at Glencore of capacity that Glencore had each day that it could fill. Would that be enough capacity to batch WTL on the Epic pipeline?
No, the minimum batches for moving WTL down Epic, as we've discussed, was 100,000 barrels because of the minimum amount necessary for them to run their pumps. That would be, what Glencore had would be a fraction of that. So Epic would be having to get additional supply from someone else.
Mr. Lynch, do you recall yesterday that we looked, well, more than yesterday, you remember we looked a couple days ago with Mr. Wishoff at Defendant's Exhibit 138, which is a set of nominations made by Glencore for crude oil shipment on the Epic pipeline?
Yes.
All right. You recall that we looked specifically at the nomination that Glencore made on December 22nd, 2020, which is the Rev 2 tab of Defendant's Exhibit 138?
Yes.
And this is about a week and a half before the end of the year email we looked at a few minutes ago, Defendant's Exhibit 61 from Ms. Dunn reserving the right to assert a default. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is this the one with the 2,000 barrel nomination of WTL?
Yes.
Does this nomination make sense to you?
No, it does not.
Why not?
Well, the problem here is that you've got WTI and WTL being nominated from receipt location Wink, the connecting carrier Delaware Crossing, and they're two different quantities, a 5,200 barrel per day quantity of WTI, a 2,000 barrel a day quantity of WTL, and they're being nominated simultaneously here. There would have to be details so that the pipelines could coordinate a batching of these two products separately for the pipeline to provide the service of keeping these two different quality streams pure from origin point to delivery point. If they came into the pipe simultaneously, the WTL, because it's the lower quantity, would just simply blend into the larger quantity and would be converted to a WTI. You recall yesterday that we looked at Defendant's Exhibit 272, which is Medallion's October 8, 2020 letter to ARM and Glencore offering to help and asking for additional information. Do you see that? Yes.
Did Medallion ever get a response to this letter from ARM or Glencore?
No.
You recall yesterday that we looked at Defendant's Exhibit 26, which is Medallion's November 16, 2020 letter to ARM and Glencore asking for documentation and forwarding Epic's response to ARM's and Glencore's letter?
Yes.
Did Medallion ever get a response to this letter from ARM or Glencore?
No.
Would it have helped Medallion to have received responses to these letters?
Yes, it would. We want to provide solutions to our customers, and we want to help them come up with a solution. I would have expected them to be cooperative, for them to provide us with the information, for us to sit down together and discuss it and try to come to some type of a solution.
Do you recognize, we'll look at Plaintiff's Exhibit 162. Remember Plaintiff's Exhibit 162, which was the February 9th, 2021 email from Mike Lassman to Mr. Wishoff of ARM and Mr. Freshwater of Glencore conveying offers with respect to future WTL batching and loading of the ship at the Pin Oak terminal?
Yes.
Did ARM or Glencore ever respond to this offer?
No.
Did you have any, we can take that down. Did you have any concerns about the communications from ARM and Glencore from October 5, 2020 to the end of to the termination of the contracts?
Yes, I did.
What were those concerns?
All my concerns were is that they just weren't acting like someone who wanted a solution. Typically, Medallion today has over 30 producing customers and 10 or 20 marketing customers. We've never had any legal problems, and if we run into a problem, we sit down with our customers, we work through the details of the problem, we discuss the contract language. In many cases, even if they agree that we're contractually correct, we try to find a solution. It doesn't. We're in this business for the long haul, and it doesn't help us to have a disgruntled or unhappy customer. So we try to find solutions, but it requires cooperation.
What is Defendant's Exhibit 18? Let's look at Defendant's Exhibit 18. You see that this is a letter dated March 19, 2021?
Yes.
Okay. You see that there, the letter here is from Glencore to Medallion?
Yes.
Do you recall Glencore terminating its credit support?
Yes.
Is that what Defendant's Exhibit 18 relates to?
Yes.
Do you recall ARM's counsel saying in an opening statement that ARM wanted return of monthly shipping charges?
Yes.
Who paid the monthly shipping charges to Medallion? That's between ARM and Glencore.
Glencore.
How did Medallion respond to Glencore's withdrawal of credit support?
We immediately demanded that ARM replace it.
Okay. Let's look at Defendant's Exhibit 30. You see Defendant's Exhibit 30 is an email dated March 23rd, 2021 from Aaron Offit of Medallion to Scott Wishoff, attaching a letter.
Yes.
And let's take a look at the letter. You see that in the second paragraph, kind of towards the end of the second line of it, that Medallion hereby requests that AEM provide additional letters of credit as defined in the agreements for cash and immediately available funds in the amount of $12,380,000 to satisfy the credit support thresholds. And then there's also a request relating to the terminal services agreement. You see that?
Yes.
Did ARM provide replacement credit support?
No.
What did Medallion do when ARM did not provide replacement credit support?
We waited for the court to rule on a temporary or injunction, and when the court allowed us to, we pulled on the letters of credit.
Now let's look at Plaintiff's Exhibit 189. You see the Plaintiff's Exhibit 189 is an email from Aaron Offit. By the way, we've seen this name Aaron Offit a little bit. Who is Aaron Offit?
Aaron Offit is Medallion's controller.
Okay. You see that he sends an email to Mr. Wishoff with an attached letter on April 15, 2021.
Yes.
Okay, and he references invoices.
Yes.
Okay. And did Medallion send these invoices to ARM in April 2021?
Yes.
Why did Medallion send ARM an invoice?
Pursuant to the terms of the contract, the non-defaulting party was to send an invoice.
Okay. And if Your Honor, I move admission of Plaintiff's Exhibit 189.
No objection, Your Honor.
Plaintiff Exhibit 1, you said, is it 189?
Yes, Plaintiff's 189.
Right, thank you. Plaintiff 189 is admitted.
Then let's look briefly at Defendant's Exhibit 52, which has already been admitted. You see at the top of the first page of Defendant's Exhibit 52, there is an email from Brock DeGetter, the General Counsel of Medallion, to Lawyers for ARM with a response to a letter that had come from ARM?
Yes.
Okay. And then if we look at the letter itself, in subsequent pages, going down to, you see that in the third paragraph, actually in the second paragraph, there's a reference to an Exhibit A, which is a revised Medallion invoice.
Yes.
Okay. And then in the third paragraph, there's a reference to an Exhibit B,
Yes.
Which is another invoice. Did Medallion send updated invoices to ARM in May of 2021?
Yes, we were crediting for Glencore's March payment.
Thank you. We can take that one down. Mr. Lentz, what is Medallion asking the court to do in this case?
Look, Medallion entered into these agreements with ARM. ARM's in the business of taking risk. When the risk goes in their favor, they make a lot of money. In this particular case, the risk did not go in their favor, and I don't believe that they should receive a bailout. Medallion entered into this deal with ARM. We relied on them paying us a fixed fee for this space for the term of the agreement. We gave up our opportunity to do this deal with Macquarie. We gave up our opportunity to collect our one-time payment of $69 million from Epic. And we've done our best to mitigate those losses, but because the market value of that transportation capacity has dropped, we're going to be $1 million short in being able to do that. Mr. Pulliam, our economist, has calculated the amounts of money due Medallion. I would like the court to rule in favor of ARM paying us the monies that are due, and to rule against ARM and the claims they've made against Medallion.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Pass the witness.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Lentz. We've met before, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that was when I took your deposition?
Yes.
And you were under oath in that deposition, right?
Yes.
You told the truth that day?
Yes.
Okay. Medallion understood that it bore the risk of Epic's failure to perform in connection with the transportation and terminal agreements. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Right. So Medallion knew that it was on the hook if Epic didn't do the job it was supposed to do, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Pursuant also to the transportation agreement.
Right, pursuant to both agreements, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, Medallion's attorneys, well, let me take a step back. You talked yesterday a little bit about Medallion's outside counsel that helped drafting the agreements, correct?
Yes.
And one of those outside counsel was Mr. Hunter Summerford from a firm Lock Lord, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Lock Lord advised Medallion in connection with the terminal agreement between Medallion and Epic, correct?
Yes.
And Lock Lord and Mr. Summerford at Lock Lord advised Medallion in connection with the terminal agreement between ARM and Medallion, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Summerford actually, on behalf of Medallion, represented to ARM that Medallion was responsible for any failures by Epic. Isn't that true?
I don't recall.
Okay, can we please put up PX 52? You see, Mr. Lentz, December 6th, well, actually, if we can go to the top. This is a December 9th email from Mr. Lastman at Medallion, Mr. Wishoff, and Mr. Dunn at ARM Energy. Do you see that?
Yes.
And do you see that he's forwarding an email from Mr. Summerford from Lock Lord that went to individuals at Medallion, including Mr. Lastman. Do you see that?
Yes,
Mr. Simmons, and who was Mr. Simmons at this time, sir?
he is in-house counsel
Okay, and Ms.
to
He,
Medallion.
she was outside counsel to Medallion, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and specifically, Ms. He advised as to the transportation agreements, correct?
yes,
And sorry, let me clarify. That's as between the transportation agreement and the terminal agreement. Ms. Heeg was advising specifically as to the transportation agreement, correct?
that was her expertise, but they were communicating to make sure that those agreements, were working hand in glove. Yes.
Okay. And if we go to bullet 2, or I'm sorry, Mr. Summerford's email where he says regarding bullet 2, do you see that Mr. Summerford says we are responsible for Epic's performance, non-performance, because based on the ARM TSA, their failure is our failure. Do you see that, sir?
I do.
Okay. And that was in response to certain questions that Glencore had raised when ARM was in the process of entering into its agreement with Glencore, correct?
That's what it looks like.
Okay. And so Medallion's lawyer said to ARM, we are responsible for Epic's failure, so you don't need to add any provisions to the contract because we're already on the hook. Isn't that what this is saying?
I'd have to confer with my counsel. I'm not certain.
Okay, but you understood, you agree with Mr. Summerford's statement to ARM that we are responsible for Epic's performance, non-performance, because based on the
I
ARM
wasn't
TSA, their failure is our failure, correct?
I wasn't a party to this email. I would have to ask him what the context of this was.
Okay. But separate and apart, and we could put this email down. You understood that Medallion bore the risk for Epic's performance, right? That was your testimony a few minutes ago, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And sir, let's move on for a second to, I just want to shift gears a little bit. You talked a little bit about Mr. Last yesterday. Do you recall testifying that Mr. Lastman was not involved in drafting the agreements because the agreements are complex and you were relying on the legal team? Do you recall that?
I recall testifying that he was involved in negotiations.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? You recall him testifying?
Yes. Testifying that he was involved in negotiations, but didn't have he was not involved in what made it into the contract, final agreement negotiations.
Okay. Well, you agree that Mr. Lastman was the primary person at Medallion that negotiated the agreements with ARM, right?
No, he was involved in negotiating terms with ARM, but he was not responsible for what made it into the agreement. That had to be vetted through the attorneys and through me.
Okay. My question was slightly different. You agree with me that Mr. Lastman was the primary person at Medallion that was negotiating the commercial terms with ARM, correct?
He was the person who was primarily in charge, yes, of communicating with ARM.
Okay. And in fact, you testified that there was a team that were involved in the negotiations, but Mr. Lastman was the only person from Medallion who you can actually recall negotiating with ARM, right? The only person whose name you can recall.
The team I was referring to is the team that is also taking information from Mr. Lastman and making sure that we get the right words into the contract, regardless of what is being discussed by the parties.
Okay. Again, my question is slightly different. Mr. Lastman is the only person whose name you could actually recall as someone who was negotiating directly with ARM. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you were not personally involved.
So I need to take a quick break. We could